Hello everyone, I'm Chef Jennifer Basil and we have been traveling from northern Italy to southern Italy. We are at the tip of the boot now and I can't wait to share with you a traditional Sicilian dish and one that is eaten both in Sicily and Calabria. So stay tuned and I will get these recipes started. We're starting with a quintessential dish from Sicily. We're going to make caponata today, which is an eggplant dish. It can be used as an antipasti or as a side dish, or typically it's served over fish. So to get started, I've already cut my eggplant and we've soaked this in a colander. We've sprinkled it with salt so all the moisture kind of draws out of it because we're gonna fry that. We are gonna saute all of our vegetables. I've got red onion, Kalamata olives, tomatoes, red bell peppers, celery, capers, and basil. And you know me, that's the other thing I love, using basil. I wonder why, since that's my last name. So let's go ahead and go over to the stove and we'll start putting this together. So there's two parts to cooking this recipe. We want to saute all of our vegetables together and then we're gonna fry the eggplant. I've got the oil being heated while we get the vegetables sauteed. So we're gonna get the pan warm. We'll put our olive oil in, because again, in southern Italy, we use olive oil. Fun fact I learned about Sicily. They actually speak Italian in Sicily, but Sicilian is actually its own language. And that's what they spoke years and years ago was Sicilian. I did not realize that those are two separate languages. So you learn something new every day. All right, let's add our red onions, our bell pepper, and our celery. I'm adding in the vegetables that take a little bit longer to soften first, and then we'll add the tomato, and we're adding capers and olives. It's going to create kind of some brininess to the vegetables. I like to have my red onions come apart. Okay, get those going. Let's toss in our tomatoes. This is just a diced tomato. You can use fresh, you can use canned if tomatoes aren't in season. I prefer using tomatoes when they are in season, and a great way to know if you're getting a good tomato is to smell it. If you smell a tomato and there's no scent, then it's not gonna taste good. It has no flavor. A tomato should smell like it just came off the vine. I usually stick with organic ones because those typically will have that smell and they haven't been traveling in a truck from the time they were green to the time they got to the grocery store when they're red. So olives went in, capers go in. And we're just kind of gonna let those soften and simmer. I see some of my vegetables are trying to escape the pan. Getting a little too hot in there for them. And I believe my oil's hot, so while that's cooking down, let's come over here and we'll fry the eggplant. Okay, we're ready to fry our eggplant. Our vegetables are simmering nicely. One thing that's important, since we put some salt on this and let the moisture come out, you do want to make sure that you've patted the eggplant dry before you throw it in the oil, because oil and water don't mix, kind of like some of my past relationships. But we're going to go ahead and get these fried up. So put our eggplant in. We want them to get just a nice golden color. And when they're fried, we're gonna put them in with our vegetables. It's a really nice vegetarian dish. The other thing I learned about Sicily, they actually produce some of the finest wines in Italy. They have so much volcanic soil that it's really conducive to growing really great wine grapes. So they produce a lot of great wines out of Sicily. I didn't know that. And being the wine drinker that I am, I'm really surprised I didn't know that. Okay, I think this is done. Let's scoop these out. Make sure the oil's drained. I have a little bit that we did beforehand. And let's mix all that in. I want to get the last of this out of the oil. Get that off the heat so we don't cause fire. Mix that all together. Let's season it with a little salt and pepper. You don't need too much salt because you've got the saltiness of the olives and the capers. And then we're going to finish it with fresh basil. It's such a pretty dish with all these great colors. And that's it. We're done. Caponata actually is served at room temperature, or it can be eaten cold. As I mentioned earlier, it can be eaten by itself. You can put it with fish or eat it as a side dish. Look at those vibrant colors. It's so pretty. Healthy, vegetarian. Got great flavor from all those different vegetables. We'll sprinkle a little bit more basil. And you know me, I like to make everything pretty. So let's top it with a basil leaf for pretty presentation. And that's our caponata. For our second dish, we're going to be making pesce spada alla Giota. Giota stands for swordfish. And I know when you think Italian food, I don't think a lot of people think of fish, but the boot is surrounded by water. It would make sense that Italians eat seafood because the boot is surrounded by water. So today we're going to make a fish dish. This dish actually originated in Sicily, but it's kind of crept over into the Calabrian region. And one thing I wanted to talk about, even though we're not using it in this recipe, is Calabrian chili peppers. A somewhat known chef that I've cooked with a few times loves to use Calabrian chilies in all of his dishes. It's like his signature. So the difference between Calabrian chili flakes, and these are actually fresh Calabrian chilies, is red pepper flakes are a mixture of all different peppers. So you've got green peppers, which aren't as hot, mixed maybe with some jalapenos, some Anaheim. Calabrian chili flakes are actually dried Calabrian chili peppers, and they tend to have a little bit more heat than a traditional red pepper flake. So I just wanted to share that information because you've probably heard Calabrian chilies, you know, what are those? So there you go. All right, let's go over to the stove and let's start our recipe. Okay, so we're gonna cook our swordfish first. I'm gonna season it with salt and pepper. We're going to dip it in flour so we get a little bit of a nice crust on it. And this recipe typically calls for us to only sear it on one side. We make our vegetable base and then we let it steam. I'm gonna cook the fish the way I cook fish, which actually is not an Italian technique. It's a little bit more French, but I promise you, I cook fish this way all the time and people always say how great the fish is. So I'm gonna teach you my technique. Okay, so we've got some salt and pepper. We're gonna dip that in flour and we're gonna do both sides since we're gonna cook this on both sides. Got the pan hot. Let's get the oil in. Let's set our fish in. We don't want to try to move this around because it's going to stick. So hot pan, make sure it's coated with oil, let it sit. We'll get a nice sear on that. After that side's done, we'll flip it and we're going to put some butter, which is not Southern Italy either. But again, this is my little hack. We'll put some butter in and then we're going to baste the fish. So swordfish is a more meatier fish. It still, I think, has a mild flavor, but it's got kind of more of a meatier texture. It's like almost like a steak texture. So I really enjoy swordfish and I love it with a tomato type base, which is what we're doing today. You get a nice brown kind of golden color on the one side, and then once you flip it, we'll let it cook a little bit longer before we baste it, but that basting is what's gonna add kind of that golden color to what you've done already. All right, flip that. Get that cooking on that side. I'm gonna add the butter so it can melt so we can baste with it. Plus, I just think butter and fish just go well together. You can kind of see how it's cooking on both sides. And fish actually is served best medium. So a lot of people like their fish fully cooked, but really fish should be cooked medium. So you should not have it raw, but you want to have it not cooked as much in the center to get the full flavor of the fish and still keep the nutritional value of it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start basting. Always baste away from you. You don't want to splash yourself with a hot liquid. And you'll see that that starts to color the fish, and it also helps it cook. So our fish is ready to take out of the pan. We're gonna set that to the side because we don't want it to overcook. And we will add shallots, some garlic. Let's let those soften just a little bit. You know, I always say, let's sweat down our onions. Come on, let's sweat, baby. And once that's done, let's throw in anchovies. Now remember folks, I promise you you're eating anchovies more than you know, so don't be afraid to use them. Some capers. And an interesting ingredient, we're gonna add some raisins. So the sweetness of the raisins is going to balance the saltiness and the brininess of the olives and the anchovies. We'll toss in fresh cherry tomatoes, because remember, in Sicily, that's one of the most abundant crops, is tomatoes. And we just want that to cook just a little bit so those tomatoes kind of blister and soften. Our pan is kind of on a high heat, so that won't take long for that to happen. And let's throw some parsley in it to season and a little salt and pepper. And remember, when you're using fresh herbs, always do those at the end. Dry herbs go in the beginning so that the sauce itself can draw the flavor out of the dry herb. Fresh can go in at the end. All right, let's get this plated so we can eat it. Our pesce spada alla giotta is done. Let's get it plated. I used the tomato that we cooked as the base, because had we steamed the fish, that's kind of how it would have been. But I promise you this is gonna be better. And we'll place our fish on top. And since we used parsley, when you garnish dishes, try to use the same herbs that you used in the dish. And also a little trick I learned in culinary school too, when you garnish, it should always be edible. Don't put something inedible as a garnish on your plate. So we've got this beautiful swordfish. I've got my red wine from Italy. You can see that's cooked beautifully, kind of at a medium. The butter on that, so good. If you've never tried swordfish, try try this dish. It's fantastic. It was my pleasure to share these recipes with you today, and I wanted to mention, you know, I'm always drinking a glass of red wine. It's okay to drink red wine with fish, and this fish recipe we did actually will stand up to a glass of red wine, so just don't worry about that. Drink the wine that you like. If you want these recipes and more, you can visit my website at jenniferbasil.com.